Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Are we allowed to say that? Here we are, episode 101 coming up soon.
101
This is
Dalmatians.
Where did you get that? Are we going to have a bit of B-roll with that bit of the cartoon with all the puppies running over each other?
101. Well, I don't know what else do you think about 101.
Room 101.
Room 101.
Which was from 1984, George Orwell.
Mm.
And I wonder how many people have lost that theory. And wasn't there a Paul Merton radio program called something like that, where you go and put all the things you don't want anymore?
In Room 101.
So we could have done that as the theme. God, we missed the trick there, couldn't we? All the things we hate. We could have said, episode 101, right, all the things that really annoy us about business. Oh, that's
be episode like 2022. Still going.
we better shut us up. Good. Well, I suppose we want to talk a bit about New Year's resolutions and all that sort of thing today. We're going to get into stuff like that.
Setting some goals.
All right, let's do that then.
Good.
Let's do a podcast. Hello and welcome to episode 101, first one of season 3 of the SME Growth Podcast from Wellmeadow. Every week trying to come up with some useful and interesting stuff for owners and managers of small and especially medium-sized businesses. And here I have Richard with me again, and we're going to be covering an interesting topic today, I think, but along the theme of if you had to come up with some sort of New Year's, I'm going to do it differently this year type resolution. We're not going to talk about going to the gym or going dry January. I mean, who would do that anyway? Or anything like that.
Yep.
Work off that turkey. Now, this is in business then. What are we going to do differently this year?
This year. And I suppose one of the things that we have been thinking quite a bit about recently is how do you systemise your growth through a referral network?
Yeah.
Which is one of the things that we've been thinking about back in December.
And even before. Remember, there's some discussions we had with that firm in Israel, actually, that started triggering that. And they came up with this concept that if 95% of your business comes from referrals, why are you spending all your efforts on the 5%, which is all about inbound and all that stuff? So it got us to thinking a lot more about what are the main routes for getting customers. Inbound for sure, doing all your usual marketing activity. Outbound, which we've done a few episodes on, go-to-market strategies, customer acquisition strategies. That's about prospecting and all that type of stuff. And then this largest third one, which is the referrals. So that includes on-sells.
And that was predominantly service businesses, wasn't it? 95%.
Well, I think the figure comes from service businesses. But as we've applied that then to our thinking across our various clients, we've realised that even those that are in reasonably hard-nosed manufacturing type settings, actually there's a large part of what they do which is really a service around it. Otherwise you're just commodity selling, right? And not many people are really in that. Everybody says, it's all about service. And there's a large part of that which is true. That a lot of customers wouldn't just go to somebody else selling the same thing because they like the fact that they know the people, they rely on them, they get the delivery times, they get the tech support, they get whatever else it may be. So even manufacturers are sorted in service in that respect. So maybe they don't have 95% of their business coming that way, but they'll have a certain amount. And some of it might be from existing customers referring someone else in their company, perhaps just, have you not used such and such for that? You need one of them? I'll send you the details. It might be from when people leave a company, change jobs, take them with them. And it might be good old-fashioned sort of networking, talking to your mate in the pub or talking on LinkedIn. I know someone who can do that type of stuff. So there's a whole range of different types of ways you may get the referrals.
So we were thinking about this. As I was saying, back in December, we went to HubSpot, HQ.
H-quarters.
Too much turkey fever.
Let's go for HQ. HubSpot House in Dublin. The headquarters for the rest of the world, anyway, obviously.
Biggest city in Europe.
What is?
Dublin.
This is going to be a joke.
Keeps Dublin in Dublin.
Oh, God. Thank goodness I saw that just enough not to.
Too many Christmas cracker jokes. That's a Christmas cracker joke. But no, so we were over there, weren't we? And obviously, not even obviously, but obvious to us because we're in it. Yeah. But they have a very good referral partner network.
Well, it is. And I don't know if it's the same for some of the other companies like that, Salesforce and what have you. But boy, have they put a lot of thought into their partner program, of which we are part. And we got a chance to meet their global head of partner relations, or whatever it is, partner ops, which is actually quite a broad role, isn't it? They were telling us all about how they recruit the new partners, how they develop them through the various tiers, and quite interestingly, how they police it all as well. You know, the terms that we all sign up to, they're not just signed and put in a drawer. They're actively audited with almost like an internal police force managing it. Which is impressive. But if you play the game straight, then there's nothing to fear, right? And you don't want other people ruining it. So yeah, it was really interesting to meet them.
So interesting to see that, interesting to see some of the measures around that, some of the tech they're using to monitor things. And it sort of got us thinking about it a little bit. Plus, we'd already been thinking about it off the back of those conversations you mentioned. Plus, we're always trying to just think through this type of stuff anyway, as those people that know us will know.
Well, and trying to systemise stuff that other people do randomly.
And systemise. So that got us thinking about, well, how would we, you know, if Carlsberg made referral network evaluation systems.
Snappy. Lovely title there.
Which, if anyone from Carlsberg is listening,
got to check, see that didn't spell something.
Then you know, how could we, you know, let's have a discussion about what could that look like.
Yeah, exactly. So you started going down a very techie route here about asking about the measurement and the structure of it, and got yourself into quite an interesting area, which was allied to other types of networks.
Yeah, so I wanted to see if you could quantify, and maybe not come up with one number, because that's simplistic in a sense.
A bit reductionist, I might say.
Yeah, possibly. No, I'm not a number. But to come up with some way of just trying to quantify a network. Mm-hmm. So if you start Googling for this, what you're going to see is an awful lot of stuff around telecoms, which is probably quite obvious. But things around bandwidth, latency, data packet, something or other.
You're pretending you don't know what that is.
Technical term. And you could take that and try and map those concepts into your own kind of business networks, but which is slightly what we've tried to think about and tried to do. But I think there's a couple of parts of that around this. One is, okay, good to measure the network once you've got it, but how do you identify who that network is? And that's kind of, I think, where we started with this, of saying, a bit like, you know, kind of total addressable market. What's the size? What's the potential kind of you know, size of a network that you can identify?
Yeah, how do you start? What's the start of that process? And we were talking anyway, weren't we, about the prospecting side of it all, and that's developing quite nicely with some of the work we're doing for our clients and for ourselves, is putting much more structure around, like you say, total addressable market, ideal customer profile, target account lists. How do you then do lead capture? How do you nurture, prospect, blah, 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 and all that. And that's been the subject of a couple of podcasts we did in the 90s, I think the episodes weren't they? Go-to-market strategy was 93-ish, something like that. And then we did customer acquisition strategy one after that. So this was trying to take that principle and say, how do we apply a systematic approach like that, but for referrers? So if you start with that type of thing with a total addressable market, what is the equivalent in the referrer partner sort of world? And that's why I said in the intro there, you have to think about quite sideways as well as forwards, who are the types of people that might, even if accidentally, be referring you. So it could certainly be customers, and this is what our friend in Tel Aviv was saying, that you treat each of your customers as an island for branching out to get new contacts. It could be the ex-employees we talked about. It could be people that you just meet on LinkedIn and you have an affinity with, and they're just sympathetic to you, whether or not they're allied to your business. It could be other people that sell to your typical customers, but with a very, very different thing. You know, in business services, that could already be quite broad. So we're all going off to try and hunt down the lawyers and the accountants and the bankers and so on, because they've got these connections. So it could be those types of people. But have you even in your CRM or in a list come up with your short list or long list? Who are the people that you might regard as your potential referrers? You may not have had a conversation with them. Don't forget, we're still at stage one. But who might be susceptible to helping you out if you can help them out in some. And
I think the actual writing down of this is quite a key part of the analysis at the starting point, because everyone will know anecdotally, Jim gives us work, Sue gives us this, whatever, that type of thing. But actually, if you start writing it down, so I did the exercise for us, and off the back of this quote around 95%, you start thinking, well, is that true?
Is that true for us?
True for us? So look.
Turns out it was.
So I started mapping that out in Miro board and just kind of looking at, okay, well, this client came from here, and then they referred us to these people, and then
like a chain reaction, wasn't it?
And a chain reaction, and you kind of get these second order, third order effects starting to happen, and you think, well, that has sort of evolved over time. But what if you started to actually put some real kind of intention behind some of this? What happens then? How can you leverage that network effect? Because rather than it being a kind of, let's just put some stuff in the sausage machine and go through your kind of funnel conversion rates of we'll meet 10% of them and convert 3%. Actually, with a network, you've got that opportunity to look at something that's potentially more exponential. So
and make it deliberate, I think was the point you were making there. Because if you looked at that Miro board you did, which was like a huge network diagram, it was really interesting to look at, because you've sort of forgotten, how did we get that client again?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, they were referred by, as you say, Mary. Well, where did we get Mary? Oh, yeah, but she was referred by Jim. But hang on, he came about because of this. So you start building this picture where you've realised you've lost control to some degree of all of that. Well, if you ever had control of it, a lot of it is sort of stochastic. And then being deliberate about it, you think, well, what type of person was Mary? Or what type of person was Jim? And why did he do that? And was there anything in it for them?
What event triggered that? Who are they? And start to go to that level of analysis for it to say, well, okay, are there any common themes here that we're seeing? And sometimes you might look at it and say, well, they gave us that referral, but that's really not what we want.
Yeah,
and that's back to your ideal customer profile. But with this in mind, looking at, okay, well, what's our ideal referrer profile?
Yeah,
who is it that we're really looking for to say these are the types of people that get our business, that understand what we're looking for, and have access to a network that... Yeah,
you come up with your own criteria, but they certainly include those. They've got to have access to your ideal customer profile. That's your ideal referrer profile, has to be the in-between. And they've got to want to do it. There's got to be some motivation, which hopefully will be mainly reciprocal. I could stumble over that word, a bit of reciprocity. So, you scratch my back, I scratch yours. And a lot of business is done that way anyway. I can probably help some of your clients out, even if it's just as a favour. And, in turn, you can help mine out as a favour. And then we may end up doing business with one another. It could work that way. So they've got to have some motivation. It might be down to referral fees. Some companies like to work that way. Quite a few don't, various sensitivities around the Bribery Act, or just whether that's a company thing or an individual thing. So you've got to come up with your own approach to that for your company. But there's got to be access to the market, to your ICP, and some motivation. So it's almost like the means, motive and opportunity, isn't it?
Yeah, and then some of those can be intangible, that you could get invited onto a podcast that's... done 102 episodes.
Would they? That'll be next week then. Anybody want to? I like what you did there. Very good.
So,
but it could be in our world. We touch a lot of different types of industries, and I have other people who've clearly cracked this sort of approach, but in their own way, maybe less evolved, but they're doing it. Where I get a phone call almost predictably every 3 months from a certain Mike. Hello, Mike. I know you're out there. You're listening, and he'll give me a ring, and he won't try and sell me what they do. He'll ask me what's business looking like, not for me personally, although he's interested in that, but amongst my clients. What's the market looking like for you? And because I know that he's plugged into a lot of other companies as well, that's of value to me too. So we both get value out of a 15, 20-minute phone call once every 3 months, just to say, what's the economy looking like amongst your audiences, your people Oh, these are struggling, that's going well, this is going gangbusters, there's a real problem over here though. Oh yeah, I'm finding that as well. Are you finding that? Yeah. So that's his way of doing it.
And I suspect I know we did our whole episode on our predictions for 2025.
Oh, yeah.
But I think that this may be more face-to-face, person-to-person, relational type of approach to business, may be coming back in vogue after the COVID years and everything being online.
We had that discussion only last month, didn't we? Where we were very much... In fact, it came of a discussion with, I will say, a younger person in business, senior, but younger. And their view, trying not to give away who that was very much that this day and age, everybody's online. Okay, that was their perspective. And my view and your view, we were having that discussion between the three of us, we're saying, well, hang on a minute, that is true in some cases, but certainly not exclusively. And there's a lot of people out there that still actually quite like a face-to-face meeting. I know it's really inconvenient and messy, and you've got the travel time and you can't cut it off after 15 minutes or reschedule it at a moment's notice. But that's kind of the point. You've invested a lot more, haven't you, if you've gone to see somebody?
Well, I think you see the trends of, and we've touched on this before, physical book sales are coming back because people want that smell of the book, the feel of the book, the whole sensory experience. Now, I'm not saying, careful.
I get it. I know you can. But you can hear a book, you hear the face, you can smell it, you can feel it.
There's something about, I think, and we're all, as listeners to the podcast will know, we're big into AI, we're big into trying all this stuff. Yeah. But there comes a point, I think, where there's got to be a balance between these things, because there's something about meeting other people, relationships, and all of these other tools are great for supplementing that. And for maybe once you've got the relationship, we don't have to see each other all the time. We can do things online, all that. Yeah. But there's something about, and I think it's going to come back into vogue, of actually, you want to kind of press the flesh or whatever it is, wear out the shoe leather.
See the whites of the eyes, all that stuff.
All those kind of...
Well, when we went to HubSpot, it's funny enough, we've been working with them for 5 years or so, and we've seen certain people there on screen a lot. But you don't know how tall they are.
Yeah.
Or what they look like from behind.
What's their legs? Have they got legs?
I know. Not that it matters, but
But it's...
And that chance to go then and have a less formal discussion. It's very hard in a half-hour Teams call to really get onto some of the personal stuff. You don't really know what's going on in someone's world. And yet when we were there, we were asking them questions like, what really matters to you to do your job? How do we get in your way? Or conversely, how do we help you? What is it that the best partners in your world really do that help you hit your measures? What are your measures? What do you get beaten up for and what do you get praised for?
I think even like really simple things like just sharing a meal together, even if it was lunch in the amazing canteen they've got there.
It is rather, isn't it?
Restaurant or whatever it is.
Full-time, what was he, wok chef or something from Mongolian
barbecue.
Yeah.
But that simple act of sharing, having a coffee or sharing a meal, that's how relationships are built around the table, isn't it? So it's...
And back to the reciprocity bit. If this isn't just a transactional thing where I'll send you a lead, you send me something, whatever that may be, money or credits or something or other. But if we're really going to believe in each other, you've got to have confidence that what you're referring is of value, because it's your name that goes alongside that referral, isn't it? And we've all had that before, where you get really nervous when you refer someone. You're really rooting for them. You want them to do a good job because your reputation's at stake.
Yeah. So we could probably jabber on about this for ages. But I think what we were trying to say is that how do we get to, taking all those threads together, how do you pull all those threads into something that becomes something that's systemized, yet not to the point where it feels like you're just, again, putting the sausage in the sausage machine and kind of poking it through.
But have the balance of the system and the
relationship.
So you've already started it out. We've got some equivalent of the total addressable market in customer sense. So what's the total size of the potential referrers? Yeah. What does your ideal referral person look like? They've got access to it, they've got motivation, the whole means, motive and opportunity. And then taking a leaf out of, let's say, HubSpot's book on how they treat their partners, but others will be the same. Anybody in a sort of partner-led arrangement, you're going to have some sort of tiering. You've somehow got to categorize people just to manage the system. And you've got to be careful not to be too rigid about this, which is where we were having some discussions, because if you're not of the size of total organization, doesn't mean you couldn't be the best referrer. A one person, a retired person without even a company at all could be your best referrer. So you've got to be careful to look beyond simplistic measures. But if you've got people tiered in some way, then work out from your point of view, if we are going at least some way down the systematic route to just as a crutch, if you like, to help you along, what would you do differently for your bronze, silver, gold, or level 1, 2, 3 type referrers? And at the lowest level, it could just be send them an email once every quarter, if you're talking volume. Or maybe you'd like to think for referrers, you'd at least give them a ring once a quarter. Maybe you don't have to set up a Teams call and schedule it or something, but just an out of the blue phone call. Oh, thanks for picking up. Just sort of a bit like Mike does that I just talked about. That goes down really well, keeping in touch. And if they don't answer, drop them a quick note or try to arrange to catch you up. I was going to tell you about such and such. If you get 5 minutes, give me a call back. And it just builds that bond. I saw someone on your LinkedIn do this. I thought that'd be quite interesting. I could contribute, blah, 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 help out like that. So if that's the next level up, and then maybe your tier ones or your golds or whatever you're going to call them, maybe you do find something a bit more personal that we talked about, which suits the culture for that individual. So it could be take them to lunch. It could be go for a pint after work if you're local. It could be, you mentioned earlier about some of the fitness stuff that you can do. Try and do something around, go for a walk, or if you know that they're into something in particular, enter an event or go along to something external to work.
So so I think they're all important for kind of, that's the sort of how you manage the relationship, isn't it? Almost the kind of thing. But I think there's maybe as part of that, and again, this depends on your depth of relationship. So I've done some work recently where there's a lot of almost education involved to say, how do I make sure that the people who are potential referrers are actually saying the right thing about our business or whoever's business? If listeners want to deploy this in their own companies, how do you make sure that the people out there who are referring you are actually saying they're on message, as it were? And maybe part of those communications that you've just talked about would include part of that would be making sure that everyone's aligned to the right message, possibly, so in this particular case, it was around educating them around what we do with HubSpot. So they'd never seen HubSpot before, they'd heard of it, but by the end of an hour or so, they were much clearer around, okay, well, if we wanted to talk about what you can do in our network, we're now way further ahead than we were an hour ago.
More about it. I presume in that meeting, though, you also spent some time to find out about their world, right? So it wasn't just educating, it was learning as well. Was it more reciprocal?
Yeah, so I think probably in that instance, we'd had a pre-meeting before because we know each other's companies quite well.
Right.
So, but we hadn't really spoken for a while. So there was a bit of catching up around what did we last do, where are we moving to, and actually realised there's an awful lot of synergies in terms of where we're going.
Yeah.
And so I think this is important in terms of if your business is evolving. We've been through a couple of pivots in Wellmeadow over the last 12, 24 months. So people who maybe you hadn't, if they were down in the bronze tier, as it were, get the
keeping up with it.
How do you get people up to speed to say, no, actually now our focus is much more over in this direction, and this is what we're doing, and getting them educated, and this is where, and even to the point of having resources, and back to the HubSpot thing, there's a lot of resources there for partners to tap into to do things. So, it's an interesting thing to think about. Okay, well, we've got how do we educate our referrers and make sure that they've got the resources they need if they're going to be actively out there or even not actively out there? But how do we just keep people informed what we're doing, what we want them to say? So
stage one, if you like, of these interactions is some sort of education phase. But as I said there, maybe it's a two-way education or education and learning, however you want to do it. You've got to learn enough about their challenges for their clients and how they could be helped at the same time as you're trying to catch them up to date with where you are. And then I guess that conversation evolves maybe in the next meeting or the next few meetings. Once you've both got a firmer grasp of what it is that each other is, what solutions you're giving, what problems you're solving, then you move into a different sort of phase where you're looking for common areas of interest. Maybe you've got straight away someone in someone else's network that might be worth an introduction. So it's an out-and-out ask. That's quite advanced. But if you're not there yet because you don't know, it may be that you just agree to do something together. Maybe you agree to do a seminar together or a webinar or jointly appear on the same newsletter. Or like you say, almost jokingly, but not really, if one of you is doing a podcast, why not do a joint podcast on a subject of mutual interest, which both sides would be interested in? Or maybe one of the other party's customers has got a specific problem and you can go in and deal with that, as a goodwill gesture, and that gets noted and mentioned in dispatches amongst the team. But all of these things have to be tailored very much and will only come about through a reasonably in-depth conversation where you've got two parties that trust each other and want to help each other. Yeah,
I think trust is a key part of that, isn't it? And sometimes you've got to have a sort of a safe project you can work on together, even if it's just we're thinking of doing this little bit of research about something, you could contribute to it.
Yeah.
Let's do a white paper together or a case study together or something. And you just
I think that comes back to the ICP or the IRP, the ideal referrer profile again. Because if you go to strangers, complete strangers, you do the education piece. I've seen this happen before where with the best of intentions, and maybe at a networking meeting where you're just meeting lots of strangers, there's the must do lunch sometime sort of sign off with no intention of ever following it through. People will often say, yeah, if we find anybody that wants your sort of thing, we'll let you know. You know it's never going to happen. Not through any bad intent. It's just it's not in front of mind. But also there's that lack of trust. There's no reason why you would, and there's more downside, more jeopardy from doing it and getting it wrong.
Well, maybe that's where there's a distinction between, for what we're talking about here is more of a network referral, relational type thing. In that instance, maybe the affiliate scheme, which could, where you could say, okay, we know, let's get down to brass tacks here. We're not going to have this referral relationship because for whatever reason.
Well, it's too one-sided, maybe.
Too one-sided or just,
So what's the difference then in your mind between a referral scheme and an affiliate scheme?
Well, I think an affiliate scheme, you could probably go a lot broader because it's very much a kind of, you're right, we're incentivizing you financially.
So it's more of a financial incentive.
Financial incentive, isn't it?
So it's a one-way referral.
One way.
We're not reciprocating in anything other than a financial reward.
And I think with that, you're probably you might get higher volumes, lower quality. I don't know. But it's very much, you're not so much putting your neck on the line. If we signed up now, we've got various affiliate schemes, haven't we? Various products. Yeah. We've got no affiliation with the owners of the products, or maybe
the numbers
some,
are tiny. We're earning like $30 here, $50 there. If you pass on one of these AI tools we've been talking about, they barely get a mention on a podcast. It's not enough to really incentivize us. And actually, you soon realize that those systems are designed that the new user will probably find out about it from you using it. Yeah. It doesn't work. So it's got to be a meaningful thing. I think it's got to be a meaningful either amount of money or gift or business benefit if you're giving some free advice or credits for your services or however you do it. So it's got to be meaningful, and offering 20 quid, 50 quid type value things just doesn't work.
No, so and it depends, I suppose, on what you're selling though, doesn't it? So if you're selling a piece of software for £100 a month or something, then you might 20 quid's 20%, isn't it? Whereas if you're selling larger
20 quid a month
contracts,
that'd be good.
If you're selling larger contracts, then so for instance, I looked at something the other day for a podcast service, and it was a minimum spend of £20,000. But if you did that, they would give you £2,500 for your first referral, then £3,000 for your next. And so whilst you're thinking, again, back to that ideal referrer profile network, there's not that many podcasts out there that are going to spend that kind of money.
No, sure, that's a rarefied upper limit.
But if you saw that, you thought, okay, well maybe I'll bear that in mind, that company, because you've seen that. Now, there's no relationship there with that company. There's no kind of we're not
it's transactional.
We're not meeting for lunch. We're not doing any other stuff. But we're still thinking, okay, well maybe we might promote that company because there's some financial gain to it.
So that's the affiliate scheme.
That's the affiliate scheme,
and they can run alongside. There's nothing wrong.
Yeah, I don't think it's an either or. It's
more
both
scalable.
ends.
But it's not necessarily going to give you the same amongst those that would be partners. They're not likely to be interested in the affiliate scheme. They're more interested in it because they want to help you, either just because they want to help you or in return for you helping them. And that's people who believe that that's how business works, then we all want to do that. We all do pro bono work, we all help each other out, and that's kind of what makes the world go round, isn't it? So there's certainly that phase after you've done the two-way education bit. You're then regularly meeting, partly just to keep in front of mind and remind each other that you're there, partly to maybe feedback on any previous referrals that have gone either way, or help communally solve client challenges, that type of thing, and maybe to explore other ways of trying to use the fact that you're working together on this sort of thing in some sort of marketing awareness, client help type thing. And then I suppose towards the end of the thinking of this process, you've got to make sure you close this out properly. And if you do get referrals, even if you're not in the affiliate scheme and we're not talking about money, there's at least a heartfelt thanks for when they come across, and not only when you close the deal. It doesn't matter whether you've closed the deal or not. That's not in the gift of the referrer, is it? It's more the idea. They've gone out of their way to suggest your name to someone else who they already know. So they put their neck on the line. That is the point where it deserves some thanks, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think I'd probably caveat that though with there should be probably some evaluation of the quality that you're getting. I think if you've got the relationship with someone and it's long term, then you're probably going to get good leads from them. but you don't just want to have loads of
But that surely
spammy leads.
I get your point, absolutely. You've got to be careful. But then if people aren't giving you good quality leads, they're not really an ideal referrer, and they'll probably move into some lower tier where you almost treat them like an affiliate. But for someone who's trying genuinely to find you the right person but maybe misses the target, it still requires some thanks for that point. Now, maybe the degree of thanks, whether that really is just a mention in dispatches, a phone call, a LinkedIn post that mentions them tagging in their boss or their customer or whatever. The different ways of doing it. We're not necessarily saying that everybody gets a Fortnum & Mason hamper every time they pick up the phone, but there's certainly different horses for courses depending on the culture of the businesses you're dealing with and what would be appropriate. But what I think, and we're guilty of it as well, and James, I'm sorry, something's on its way. When you want to say thank you for that type of thing, then do it quickly. A bit like they say with management, praise quickly.
Yeah, I suppose I'm always trying to think about how you quantify all this stuff, isn't it? And there is a quantitative and a qualitative element of this, and I think maybe looking at it in bulk areas, you've got that education piece at the start, you've got that engagement piece in the middle to keep people going, and then probably some form of evaluation, if I'm going to stick with my enunciation here. And that evaluation might be, okay, well, what is the quality of the leads? What's the value of the leads? And like you say, they should be rewarded. But you could, depending on how systemised you want it to be, and also I think from our context, because we probably know our networks quite well anyway, but if you've got a larger company with maybe you've got a Salesforce, or maybe it's not just a Salesforce, it could be anybody in the business. If you wanted to evaluate this across your organisation, and there's 50, 60, 100, 200, 300 people, actually being able to put some measures to this could be quite an interesting exercise for people to think about.
That's quite an interesting challenge, isn't it? When it's not just the business owners thinking for themselves in a small business, but you've got a sales team, people in finance, people in engineering and technical often have better relationships with the customers than the salespeople do because it's at the coalface. All of that. Where are those networks, and how are we making sure that everybody gets to leverage the company's success?
And I think what we're saying here, so we're almost having a bit of a thought experiment on the podcast as we go through this. There's no right or wrong answers, but hopefully this is some guidance for people to start thinking about, if we were to look to systemise this in our specific business context, how do we quantitatively look at this, qualitatively look at it, reward referrers, reward the team for driving this, because it does take a bit of effort, but actually the main thing is, how do you actually just look at how do we systemise and scale our referral networks?
And that's what we've done now, and we happen to be using HubSpot because it's our tool. Everybody will have their own, but we're starting to put in the right properties against the various contacts so we know whether they are. We can see what the workflow is that they're going through, what pipeline are we taking them through, and we can set up reminders and tasks and make sure these things happen more systematically.
It's that age-old adage, isn't it, of you manage what you measure. And I think this is just trying to put some form of measure on what is the network effect of your business relationships.
So you could well be listening to this out there in the big wide podcast YouTube world somewhere near the beginning of January, if you've picked it up when it was just dropped, or maybe later in the year. But the point is, we're trying to inspire you to think, what could you do differently this year? Don't come back to work and just carry on doing the same old and expect a different outcome. This is something that you may be able to do. Not a lot of people have got a very systematic approach for how they deal with their referrers. And I think this is a great opportunity to really put some thought into this and make a bit of a mark, make 2025 a bit different. That should give us some food for thought as well.
Exactly.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the SME Growth Podcast, episode 101, brought to you by Wellmeadow. And as you probably gathered, if you've listened to enough of these, we help companies to grow, and we do that specifically around a HubSpot platform and all the things that it can do to help you get organised. Please mention us to other people. Lots of people have been doing so, and our YouTube views in particular are going through the roof at the moment. So thank you, everybody, for referring us, but also to those of you listening on Spotify and Apple and Amazon Podcasts and all those sort of platforms. Please share it and tell everybody else about it, or just put a good word in when you're next having a chat with them in the pub. And in the meantime, good luck with your business.